What is going on, Pretender here, back with another Honkai style guide, and today I'm here with the full in-game guide for Anaxa. So in this video, I'm going to be taking you over directly what his kit and eidolons are, then I'll be taking you over his best lightcone options, followed by that will be best relic sets and planar ornaments, followed by that will be relic main stats and substat recommendations, and at the very end I will be giving some team building / team ideas for you to use in your situation. Everything in this video is time coded, so if you want to skip past maybe the kit part and just get straight to the light cones, or if you just need the relic options, or maybe you just want the team ideas, then everything in this video is once again time coded. There is timestamps that you can flip through for whatever you do need. That's all I want to say. Before I get into the video, if you guys found this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, dropping a like is greatly appreciated. If you're new or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all other types of startup content and guides. If you know anyone that may need a Anaxa guide, be sure to send them this video as it may help them, and let's get straight into the video. So first, going over his kit eidolons, I'll be reading them and also putting it up on the screen, so if you want to follow along. Anaxa is a wind character following the path of erudition. His basic attack deals wind damage equal to 100% of Anaxa's attack to one designated enemy. His skill deals wind damage equal to 70% of Anaxa's attack to one designated enemy, and additionally deals 4 instances of damage. Each instance of damage deals wind damage equal to 70% of Anaxa's attack to one random enemy, prioritizing bouncing to enemy targets that have not yet been hit by the instance of skill. When used, for each attackable enemy on the field, this skill has its damage dealt increased by 20%. His ultimate inflicts a sublimation state on all enemies, then deals wind damage equal to 160% of Anaxa's attack to all enemies. In the sublimation state, the targets will simultaneously be inflicted with physical, fire, ice, lightning, wind, quantum, and imaginary weaknesses, lasting until the start of the target's turn. If the targets do not have control res, they are unable to take action in the sublimation state. His talent: each time Anaxa lands one hit on enemy targets, inflicts one weakness of a random type to the targets, lasting for 2 turns, with priority to the weakness type that the target does not already possess. While Anaxa is on the field, inflicts the qualitative disclosure state to enemies that have at least 5 different types of weaknesses. Anaxa deals 30% increased damage to targets afflicted with qualitative disclosure state. In addition, after using basic attack or skill on them, unleashes 1 additional instance of skill on the targets. This additional skill does not consume any skill points and cannot trigger this effect again. If the target has been defeated before the additional skill is used, it will be cast on 1 random enemy instead. His technique: after using technique, inflicts the terrified state on enemies in a set area. Terrified enemies will flee in a direction away from Anaxa for 10 seconds. When allies enter battle via actively attacking a terrified enemy, it will always be considered as entering battle via attacking a weakness. After entering battle, Anaxa applies 1 weakness of the attacker's type to every enemy target for 3 turns. For his bonus traces, is A2. When using basic attack, additionally regenerates 10 energy. At the start of the turn, if no enemy targets are in the qualitative disclosure state, immediately regenerates 30 energy. His A4, based on the number of erudition characters in the team, one of the following effects will be triggered in the current battle. One character increases Anaxa's crit damage by 140%, which includes just running him. You don't need a separate character, just running Anaxa does count. And at least 2 characters increases damage dealt by all allies by 50%. And his A6, for every 1 different weakness type an enemy target has, the damage that Anaxa deals to that target ignores 4% of their defense. Up to a maximum of 7 weakness types can be taken into account for this effect. For his eidolons, his E1, after using skill for the first time, recovers 1 skill point. When using skill to hit enemy targets, decreases the target's defense by 16% for 2 turns. His E2, when enemy targets enter the battlefield, triggers 1 instance of Talent's weakness implant effect and reduces their all-type res by 20%. His E4, when using skill, increases attack by 30% for 2 turns and stacks up to 2 times. And his E6, the damage dealt by Anaxa is 130% of the original damage. The 2 effects in the Trace Imperative Hiatus will be triggered directly and will no longer depend on the number of erudition characters in the team. Taking a look at the best lightcone options for Anaxa, overall his far and none best one is going to be his signature lightcone, which provides the wearer 10 energy when the wearer's turn starts. If the enemy target has a weakness implanted by the wearer, increases the wearer's damage dealt to it by 60%. When an enemy target gets attacked by the wearer decreases the target's defense by 12% for 2 turns, and the same type of effects cannot stack. With this lightcone, Anaxa achieves the ability to have a 2-turn ultimate without any other help. So that's a big selling point of this lightcone, to have that ultimate, because now you can keep the sublimation state on your enemies for a lot longer than you would without it. On top of that, this lightcone gives you a massive 60% increase to damage dealt when implanting a weakness, which Anaxa does implant every weakness with his ultimate, and also implants a weakness with every attack he does. And to top it all off, there is a defense shred. It's a very low amount, 12% isn't too noticeable, but obviously this becomes stronger if you have his E1, if you're running the Genius set. He also has defense ignore in his kit, which pairs really well with defense shred. So it still is a nice bonus you can have, and for overall damage and usage, this is far and none his best option. Another really good option for Anaxa's damage is actually Herda's signature lightcone, which provides the wearer a 12% increase to crit rate, and when the wearer uses their ultimate, increases the wearer's skill and ultimate damage dealt by 60% for 3 turns. After the wearer uses their ultimate, if this ultimate consumes 140 or more energy, it recovers 1 skill point. So Anaxa still does want to be built with crit, so the extra 12% is very nice. On top of that, you get a big 60% increase to ultimate and skill damage dealt when you do use your ultimate, which you're going to be using a lot. And to top it all off, you do actually get an extra skill point at the very end, since Anaxa's ultimate does actually use 140 energy. And since Anaxa wants to use a skill a lot, if you're running him with the Herda and you just happen to have 2 of these lightcones for some reason, that will also help there too, as recovering a skill point for a skill point hungry character is going to be super good, which is why this is one of the other close second best options. Another really good free-to-play option is the Grey Cosmic Enterprise, which is a free S5 in the event that we do have with the Star Wars world. So I'm just going to show it at S5, which will increase the wearer's attack by 16%, and for every 1 different weakness type that an enemy target has, increases the damage dealt to it by the wearer by 8%, up to a maximum of 7 weakness types can be taken into account. Attack percent is super important on Anaxa, as he doesn't really have any sources of it, so any source that does give him attack percent is super beneficial. And as this whole thing is implanting as many weaknesses as possible, you can get up to a 56% increase to damage dealt, which is almost as good as his signature. And so this lightcone is a very surprisingly, shockingly strong option for his free-to-play options. Air Edition characters often have the benefit of using this lightcone if you do have it, so the Battle Pass lightcone is going to be a free damage increase just for throughout the battle. After entering battle, increases the wearer's damage based off their max energy, and each point of energy increases damage by 0.2%, and up to a maximum of 160 energy will be taken into account. And at S5, it becomes a 0.4%. Anaxa unfortunately cannot make use of the full effect of this, as he doesn't have 160 energy requirement, he has 140. But even with 140, it just becomes a free damage increase throughout the entire battle with no conditions. Unfortunately, it doesn't provide other stuff like attack percent, doesn't provide any crit, all that kind of stuff, but it is still a free overall damage increase. So if you have it and you don't have the other options, you can use this. Another option you can use is actually Jingwan's signature lightcone as well, which we're going to ignore the second part with the Summon's Corpus increasing damage up by follow-up attacks, as Anaxa does not have access to a follow-up attack. But the first part increases the wearer's crit damage by 36% and increases damage up by the wearer's skill and ultimate by 18%. So it becomes a free crit damage stick, so that's going to be good because he does give himself a bunch of crit damage, but rolls are still nice to have. On top of that, you get a free increase to his main source of damage being the skill, and also a damage increase to his very hard hitting ultimate. So just getting a free damage increase to those 2 sources of damage is going to be good, especially the skill, because again, that is his main source of damage, which is why it's another option you can use. Not as strong as the other ones, but you can still use it. Another option you can use if you don't have any of the other options is the other free-to-play series of Breakfast Lightcone, which increases the wearer's damage by 12%, and for every enemy defeated by the wearer's attack increases by 4% up to 3 times, and at S5, it's a 24% increase to damage with 8% attack. So stacking this up is going to give you up to a 24% increase to attack while also giving you 24% damage, and as I mentioned, attack percent is going to be really good. Unfortunately, this will require you to defeat enemies with Anaxa himself, so if you are running him with someone like the Herda, it might be a bit difficult. Anaxa himself has no problem of killing enemies, especially the smaller ones on the side, but depending on the team you are using him on, it may be a bit difficult sometimes, but if you are able to stack it up, it becomes an option you can use. Another option you can use is Genius's Repose, which increases the wearer's attack by 16%, and when the wearer defeats an enemy, the wearer's crit damage increases by 24% for 3 turns. And at S5, it's a 32% increase to attack with a 48% increase to crit damage when you do defeat an enemy. So again, attack percent super good, so when you do get an actual 32% increase, that's going to be very noticeable, as again, Anaxa has practically no sources to give himself attack, and a 48% increase to crit damage when just defeating a singular enemy. I did mention with seriousness of Reckless, it can be a bit issue to defeat those enemies, but just defeating 1 enemy is a lot easier than opposed to 3 to stack up seriousness of Breakfast, so I'm sure you can definitely easily stack this up, and defeating an enemy gives you that big 48% increase to crit damage, which is why it's another option you can use. For the best relic sets for Anaxa, You do actually have quite a few amount of options, and it also does depend on what you do actually want to do. If you are running him as a hyper carry character, the best set for his damage overall is going to be 4-piece of the Genius set. 2-piece is useless since he doesn't do quantum damage. 4-piece, when the wear, deals damage to the target enemy, ignores 10% defense, and if they have quantum weakness, additionally ignores another 10% defense, giving you up to a 20% defense ignore with the 4-piece. The reason this is his best is because he already has up to 28% defense ignore in his base kit, plus this that he will always be able to do because he's able to implant every single weakness, which does include quantum. This set plus his base kit alone is actually giving you up to a 48% increase to defense ignore, which makes it very, very effective, because a low amount of defense ignore, let's say 10%, 15% on its own, is kind of whatever. But once you get to these higher amounts, and 48% is definitely on the higher side, it is very noticeable. This also doesn't include if you have other sources of defense ignore, such as Sunday E1, which is an additional 16% defense ignore. You can get to very, very high amounts of defense ignore with Anaxa. Also gets further amplified if you are running defense shred, so let's say you maybe have his E1 or his S1, which both have sources of defense ignore, which can make this even stronger. And so with the massive amount of defense ignore you can get with this set plus his base kit is why it's overall one of his best for his hyper carry / main DPS option. Another set that is usually always going to be the best as the Herda sub-DPS, but still can actually be good in setups, is running the Eagle set. 2-piece increases wind damage by 10%, which is useful as he is a wind character, and the 4-piece, after the wearer uses their ultimate, their action is advanced forward by 25%. So this is really good as it allows you to get more turns when you are using your ultimate, and Anaxa has a very, very accessible ultimate with a low ult charge and a lot of ways to get energy, which is why it's actually really easy to cycle. On top of that, this can actually allow you to still do a -1 setup as a hyper carry with running attack percent boots by getting about 102, 103 speed, and then once you do use your ultimate, that pushes you up to around having a more total action value over a Sunday that has 134 speed. So it actually does allow for setups like that, but overall, even as just a sub DPS with the Herda, it becomes his best, and still is really good on hyper carry alone, but can also opt for that setup where you do run attack percent boots. Another really good set is the 4-piece of the Scholar set. 2-piece increases crit rate by 8%, and the 4-piece increases damage dealt by skill and ultimate by 20%, and after you do use ultimate, additionally increases the damage dealt by the next skill by 25%. So the 2-piece giving you crit rate is really nice as you do want to have a good crit ratio on Anaxa, and crit rate is more important as he gives himself a big 140% increase to his own crit damage. And the 4-piece is really good as it does amplify his main source of damage, which is a skill. His skill is the main focus of damage, but his ultimate does also receive a buff, and his ultimate does good damage on itself as well. And then every time you do use the ultimate, which is going to be very often, the next skill you do has an additional 25% increase to damage. So your main source of damage for that one skill is going to be further amplified. And even outside of not having that buff, it is still getting that 20% increase for both skill and ultimate, which is why it's one of the other best sets you could use. Another really good set is the 4-piece of the Pioneer set. 2-piece increases damage dealt to enemies with debuffs by 12%, which they always will have a debuff on them. And the 4-piece increases crit rate by 4%, where it deals 8%/12% increased crit damage to enemies that have at least 2/3 debuffs. After the wearer inflicts a debuff on enemy targets, the aforementioned effects increase by 100% for one turn. To make full use of this, you just want to ensure you have the 3 debuffs on enemies, and Anaxa does have a debuff to actually proc the aforementioned effects. So 2-piece just gives you a free 12% increase to your damage, since enemies will always be debuffed. 4-piece gives you an extra 4% crit rate, which is nice. And if you do proc the actual aforementioned effects increase by 100%, it becomes a big increase to the crit damage you are dealing to those enemies. Out of all the damaging sets, this one is overall the worst in my opinion, but is still really, really good and is one of his other best sets for his damage. Past that, it is going to be combining 2 pieces, so you can do something like 2-piece Scholar with 2-piece of the Wind set for the 2-piece wind damage, or you can combine 2-piece of one of those and do 2-piece of the debuff set as well, that also works. Or you can combine 2-piece of any of those and do 2-piece of one of the attack percent increasing sets, so the Wind Soaring set, the Dot set also works, the new Hero set also does work, or also Musketeers for their all 2 pieces, giving 12% attack. But again, overall, the best set you want to do does actually depend. If you want to do that attack percent setup where you're able to hit the breakpoint speed and -1 with the Eagle set, that is actually going to be really strong. And then if you're running them as a sub DPS, you want to run this. Overall, for a hyper carry, the Genius set is usually the best and gives you the best for his damage output. If not that, Scholar is also fantastic. If not that, Pioneer is also fantastic. And then it would be combining one of the two pieces that I did mention. For Planar Ornaments, overall the best one is going to be Rule and Arena, which provides an 8% increase to crit rate, and when the wearer's crit rate reaches 70% or higher, damage dealt by basic attack and skill increases by 20%. So an 8% increase to crit rate is going to be nice, and you definitely will want to have more than 70% crit rate on Anaxa, otherwise it's going to be very inconsistent. And once you do have that, you get a 20% increase to your main source of damage, primarily being skill. You may run into times where you do need to basic, and so the set also increasing your basic attack damage by 20% is thankfully not completely wasted. So the times where you may run out of skill points so you can't actually use the skill, or in any case when you do just want to use a basic for a certain reason to get, just save a skill point and such, that damage is also going to be getting increased, so it's not completely useless as I did mention, but it's mainly for the focus that it also increases skill damage, and that is once again his main source of damage, which is why Rulin is overall the best option. If you are running him with the Herda or you're running another erudition alongside him, then you can also use Yzma, which gives him a 12% increase to attack, and if entering battle and one teammate follows the same path as the wearer gets a 12% increase to crit rate. So in this case, you would need another erudition character, and then the also free 12% attack is very nice because Anaxa is very attack deprived. He has a lot of damage sources, but he doesn't really have any attack sources. So the extra 12% attack is nice, and then again, 12% crit rate is going to be good. So if you are pairing him with the Herda, or you are running another character like Jade alongside him, then it is a good option you can use as well. Another good option you can use if you do get to 135 speed at least is Glamoth, which increases the wearer's attack by 12%, and when the wearer's speed is equal to or higher than 135/160, the wearer deals 12%/18% more damage. So again, 12% attack is going to be nice, and you just gotta make sure you hit 135 speed to actually get the extra 12% damage. And if you somehow are able to get 160 speed in battle, let's say maybe you have Robin E2 buff with someone like Ruan Mei, or maybe you're running a Brody E2 setup, if you can get it to 18%, it becomes that much more stronger. But even at 135 speed, it is fine, as it does give you 12% more damage along with 12% attack, which is why it is a good option. Another option that this time is actually pretty good to run is Space Sealing Station, which will give you up to a 24% increase to attack, 12% for free, and if you have 120 speed or higher, an additional 12%. As I mentioned, Anaxa really has no sources of attack, so getting attack is going to be good, and this gives you an extra 24%, which is why it's good. You're definitely better off getting something like Izumo or something like Rudolin instead, but Space Sealing Station still does perform quite competitively, which is why if you do have good pieces for it, it is an option. For the main stats on the relics, for the body, you will primarily be doing crit rate because that's what you mainly want to get a good stat of, as crit damage is less important. But if you have really good crit rate rolls, then you can opt to do crit damage. You can also do attack percent body, as again I mentioned he's attack percent deprived, and if you are able to get good crit rate stats, maybe you have really good rolls, he gives himself a bunch of crit damage already, maybe you have stuff like Sunday or Sparkle buffs and so on. To make sure he does actually have a good crit ratio in battle, you can opt to do an attack percent body. That's going to be a very rare case though, and if you are running him as a sub-DPS, that is practically never going to be the case, so crit rate is going to be the best and most common. Again, if you have really good crit rate rolls and you have next to no crit damage rolls, then you still can opt to do crit damage, and then attack percent body is going to be in the rare case that I did mention. For the feat, you primarily want to do speed to get him at least 135 so you can do a -1 setup, or just to make sure he has enough turns when you are running Eagle set as a sub-DPS. But as I did mention previously, if you are using the Eagle set and you want to do a -1 setup, you want to run attack percent boots and make sure you just get to 102/103 speed, and then once you get the ultimate, it will bring you up to what you do need. For the orb, you want to run attack percent. You can do wind damage, but attack percent is going to be noticeably better, just due to the fact that Anaxa already has so many sources of damage and next to no attack percent sources, so attack percent is usually always going to be the best case. And for the link rope, you can do attack percent or energy regenerate. Attack percent is going to be the best for his damage and is definitely going to be the one you are going to use if you are using something like a signature light cone, or if you do have a setup to make him achieve a 2-action ultimate. The energy regenerate link rope is usually used just so he can actually achieve a ultimate within 2 actions. It will unfortunately drop off his damage by a bit, but it will let you get the ultimate off, get the weaknesses off, and also potentially make enemies not be able to act. So his ultimate is important, and in cases where you may not have a signature light cone, or you may not have any sources to give him a quick turn, you don't want to rely on enemies hitting you, and so on, you can opt to use energy regenerate. For these substats, first you want to get speed to what you do actually want it to be. So if you're running him as a hyper carry, you want to do a -1 speed setup and such, or you're just running him as a sub DPS overall, focusing him to get the breakpoint, so 134 speed primarily is going to be your goal. And then if you want anything higher than that, so 143 and so on, then you would focus on that. And even if you are doing the attack percent boots, you still want to get enough substat rolls where you can actually get him to 102 or 103 speed to actually make sure the eagle buff will get you above the breakpoint amount. So again, first focus on the breakpoint you do want to hit. Past that is going to be your generic DPS rolls, so crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent. Crit rate is really important, attack percent is really important, crit damage less so, but you still want to get rolls on it, as more attack percent rolls is going to be very nice for him. So again, first focus on speed and what you want to get it as. If you're running him as a general sub DPS or a hyper carry with a different set that's not the eagle set, or even as the eagle set but you don't want to do that setup, then just 134 or higher. If you are doing the eagle setup with attack percent boots, make sure to get him to 102 or 103 speed. Past that is going to be more crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent. Now for the team building / team idea options for Anaxa. As he is both a main DPS and sub DPS, the sub DPS part definitely just depends on what you want to do, because a lot of teams he's not going to be optimal, but he still can be a slotted in, as long as you do have AoE buffs that do benefit him as well. But for the first example, as a hyper carry, a team would look like this. So you'd have Anaxa as your hyper carry. A very good pairing with him is going to be an action advancer such as Sunday with a -1 speed build, or if you are doing the setup I mentioned with 102, 103 speed with the eagle set and Sunday at 134 speed. Those kind of setups are super powerful for him, as he is able to get 2 skills and then get an action advance and another 2 skills. And then another harmony spot would be going to someone like Tribi. Tribi is fantastic, especially if you have something like the E1, and someone like Robin is also equally as fantastic, as her buffs are very beneficial to him as well, especially with their massive attack increase, which is super good for him. But depending on which one you have free and which one you want to use, you can just go ahead and put them there. And then your last slot will be your sustain. So one of the best ones you can use for him is going to be Huohuo. And she also does have an attack percent buff with energy, but if you don't have her, you have a different sustain, you can use someone like Aventurine as well. You can use Luocha, Linksha, and so on. Just whatever your best sustain is. But overall, Huohuo will be the best option you can use. And then if you don't have Sunday, you'd sub it out for a different -1 speed build, so you can use someone like Bronya instead. I don't really advise doing a base speed Anaxa with a hyperspeed Sparkle or a hyperspeed action advancer. You can, but it's not as strong. But if you don't have other options and you don't have the build, you still can opt to do that. And if you are running him as a sub DPS, so he's not actually the main DPS, so let's say you're running the Herda sub DPS. I don't actually have the Herda, so I'm going to go ahead and just put normal Herda as the example. So pretend this is the Herda, and then you'd run the other AoE buffer, so that depends on what you have. For this example, I'll use Tribi, and then your last slot will once again be the sustain. Use whatever the best one you do have, so in this case I'd be using Huohuo, and it would look something like that. And then if you are running a hyper carry Anaxa but with an air edition character, so you want to get double the damage, but if you are using an air edition character and you want to get the bonus damage dealt instead, then you'd run someone like Jade alongside him as well, as she's able to provide him good buffs with the speed and also be a good sub DPS. And since Anaxa attacks a lot, you're able to generate a lot of stacks for Jade and get good damage output overall. And yep, that is the full guide for Anaxa. Once again, I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all other types of Star Wars content and guides. And I'll see you later. Peace out.